Today on Panelism, we are discussing an adorable little book about mice with swords.
Welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I'm Taylor Trask.
I'm Todd A.
And Todd, we are back again. We're going to do a normal book review episode after a couple episodes where I call them evergreen episodes, where we just talked about a few things. If you haven't listened, 2 weeks ago we did a ownership versus subscription episode, and last week we did digital versus physical. So if you've ever pondered those questions, or if you've been thinking about changing your library up, go back and check those episodes out. But this week we're back to books.
Yeah, and we're doing one that I read, and I intentionally picked something that I mentioned in episode 103, where we talked about subscriptions versus ownership. As you know, if you've listened to the last couple episodes, I'm trying out the Comixology Unlimited subscription. It's quite a misnomer. It's not actually unlimited. A lot of stuff still charges on that.
False advertising.
But I did mention this book that I just downloaded because it was available and enjoyed it so much digitally and liked the look of it so much that I'm absolutely going to get a physical copy of this and just maybe even all the volumes. I don't know. It's just,
I have a question right out of the gate.
Yeah.
How did you first say what the book is, because it's a very interesting title that I have never heard of before. And then I have a follow-up.
I'm going to talk about Mouse Guard Fall 1152. That's like the year 1152. It is on Archaea Press, and it is by David Peterson. And this volume came out in 2007. And in the preface there, he says it had actually been 10 years of him working on these stories before he actually decided, went through the process to actually create them in this graphic form, I guess, and seek a publisher. So, we're talking about ideas that have been in David Peterson's head for 22 years at this point. So, wow. It was a pretty interesting book to approach with like all that in mind.
I have many ideas in my head that have been around for 10 to 15 years myself. So maybe there's something to that.
Exactly.
Maybe it's like these projects that go on. So knowing that, how the hell did you come across this on Comixology? Was it a recommended, like if you like this, or if you read this, you like this, or did you just see it and go, hey?
It may have been recommended to me in the unlimited section. I don't think so, though. No, I think I searched for it intentionally, because here's the thing. In the 10 plus years, it's only been like 11 years that I've really like hardcore gone to comic conventions. I have seen Mouse Guard at probably every convention in that time, and have always been curious, like, what is this? It would just be these like Mrs. Frisbee kind of drawings of mice. They're wearing like capes that are just not, it's just a piece of cloth that's knotted around their neck, and they're carrying one sword. It's not like these armored mice or something, but it just looked sort of childlike and, just like children's literature like, and I just never struck me as something I would be interested in. And then I don't know exactly when this happened, but a few years ago, they put out a role-playing game, and I remember a friend remarking on this, and both of us were wondering, like, was this a game that they turned into a comic, or was it a comic they turned into a game? It was that thing of like, we don't even know the origin of what this whole world is here. But it was just something I'd just in the last few months had kind of recalled, like, oh yeah, I should look into that. And when I got the unlimited subscription, I looked for Mouse Guard, and several volumes are available for free on Comixology when you're an unlimited subscriber. So yeah, I borrowed them all and downloaded them, and I was really it was a very pleasant surprise. You know,
Wow.
there were several things I've checked out that I've been back and forth on, and this was one that uh it's like a slow burn kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't open the first page and go, oh my God, I got, this is amazing. I got to just speed read through this. It was definitely like it took a few days to kind of, pick it up. Like I didn't sit down and read it in one
Ah.
sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely sort of worked my way through it. And as it built to the climax of this story, I just found myself like, just really like studying the art and really getting into it. So, yeah, I present it to you today for our discussion.
For our consideration, were you a big fan of Watership Down or the Rats of Nim? Because as I'm looking, and you mentioned Mrs. Frisbee, but as I'm looking at this, I just get a big vibe off of those sort of
I
yeah,
think I
those late
liked,
'70s, early '80s movies that really
yeah,
give
yeah, I
animals.
definitely conjured that in my head. I think I liked the Rats and Nim pretty well. I mean, I think I liked the book more than the movie.
There was a
Uh,
Rats and Nim book. I'm sorry, I'm not aware of this. I feel
uh,
really left out now.
well, I think that's what that title was. I said I think the book may have been called Mrs. Frisbee
And the Rats of Nim
and
or
the Rats
something.
of Nim or something
Okay.
like that. And
Okay.
uh, yeah, this just just saying Frisbee doesn't sound like the right word, but yes, it is Miss Frisbee and the
Miss
Rats of
Frisbee.
Nim.
Yeah.
But was that the movie or the book? Maybe the
The movie
book
was the
was.
Rats of Nim. They didn't put Miss Frisbee's name in the title.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that was a deal, but like, I don't really like vermin. So it's not like I thought mice are cute and I really want to read a book about mice or something. I was like, not that I was like grossed out or something. I just thought like,
Well, there's a
I don't need to.
tradition. There's a tradition, stretching back to, I mean, Animal Farm and probably before that, of taking animals and telling these interesting political or sociological allegorical stories on top of it. Even something as innocent as American Tail, where Fievel the mouse has to immigrate to the U.S. and gets lost along the way.
Yeah.
Like something like that. The Rats of Nim obviously is much more serious. Animal Farm, like I mentioned, like all these things. Does this book fit into that tradition?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it does in its own way. It's not an allegory, as far as I know, but it does that thing that I think is really interesting in those movies, where obviously, like, the mice are very vulnerable and very small. This is not about mice standing up to like a bigger predator or something. That's like an easy kind of allegory to see there of,
or an evil mouse or an evil rat or something.
Well, that is what it's interestingly about policing its own. And so I'll get into the actual mythos of the mouse guard, which is kind of hooked me when I started reading it, which was sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. Do you have questions?
No, I was going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you end up hearing little sweet meows behind me, my own cat is listening intently. And so if you're listening, you're like, what? Is there another animal? Yes, she wants to be part of it too. So I apologize ahead of time. Go on.
Well, so the story is, and I think we're kind of assuming it is the human years, 1149 through 1152.
Okay.
There is a weasel warlord that they fought in the Winter War of 1149. But that's sort of the back setting for this. The mice know, and they do there's a really cool intro of this. Like, chapters have an introduction that's written out just sort of prose style to, like, this is the setting, it's the narrator's voice or the omniscient narrator kind of thing. But in the very first chapter, there's this cool thing of this one mouse who delivers grain between the mice cities is telling the story of, let me tell you how the mouse guard began. And he talks about, we knew how to build our cities, how to tuck them away and hide them and protect them, because everything is our predator. Everything's bigger than the mouse. But the problem was, as we got spread out, we couldn't get from city to city and do things like grain deliveries, or help each other in their defense. We couldn't just be out on an open road. So the mouse guard was formed, and they are basically like escorts and pathfinders. That says the way they describe them is weather watchers, scouts, and bodyguards. So basically, they're the ones who will go out, with just their sword and their cape,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that the mice in between the cities are safe. It so happens that this grain merchant, who is this mouse who's delivering his grain, does not make it to the city where he's going. So that's how we first encounter the mouse guard. They've been sent out to find this old fur, and it's like a neat, innocent little way to start it. But you can also see I guess, it's not the allegory to a human story, but it's an analog to how you would start any kind of, not sorcery, but like fantasy epic in that sort of, knights and medieval times,
Are there humans present in the story and they're just not acknowledged, or is this like a world without humans?
They are not acknowledged.
But they're there. It's like there's farmers and that kind of stuff that
we can assume, but they're not even mentioned. They're not seen. This is on such a small scale.
Mm-hmm.
It rarely ever, and even to the extent that it does zoom out,
mm-hmm.
it's still giving you like a mouse perspective. So it's never zooming out to see sort of like the human view of the world and how small this really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about zooming in on the mice. So when a snake surprises them, you're seeing this huge snake, that covers the page, and you're seeing how much it overwhelms these three small mice in the mouse guard.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, to me, that I think that was one of the things that's just so endearing about it is it has this really consistent perspective from the mice there.
Mm-hmm.
It's never trying to tell a bigger, clunkier story or something. So you end up getting really invested in the actual characters of these mice. And that was one of the things that's so surprising that it comes through, is you really feel like, I got it. I understand the individual characters of these sort of six. I could probably name six mice whose characters I get, Well,
let's go through them. Let's give us the cast or the supporting cast if it's
well, we start out in that first chapter. The three that go looking for the old fur who's delivering the grain are Saxon, and I would believe
great name, by the way.
Yeah, Saxon, Kinsey, and then I believe the third one would be pronounced Liam, but it's spelled Liam, Lieam. I've never heard that pronounced, or
clearly British author. I mean, right?
I wonder, actually. I don't even know.
And those are all very British names.
Right, exactly. But you quickly understand. Well, you don't. I mean, it's just not explicit. There's no moment of like, Kinsey was the oldest member of the guard, and Saxon was the hothead. It's never has to be described that way. You just see it through their actions.
Oh, okay. I love that, by the way.
They, after there's this, typically like kind of scary moment where they do have to get away from a snake, and they run up a burrow in a tree, and then they have to hold guard, like they stand guard, like you would in any kind of medieval fantasy sort of setting.
Mm-hmm.
And you clearly understand, like, Liam is the smaller one, and probably younger, and Kinsey is the older one. Kinsey does not carry a sword. He carries a staff, like just a walking stick. That's what he fights
Mm-hmm.
with.
Mm-hmm.
And you do understand that Saxon is the hothead. And I say he, but I don't actually know if they are he's.
They don't specify that in any.
There are some, like there's a Gwendolyn, and she is basically the queen. And then I forgot the name of the other mouse who is a female, but yeah, I'm just kind of assuming these three are men, so I apologize if that's incorrect. They, so there's a scene where they escape the snake and they hold a guard, and then the next morning when the snake's gone, they come down, and it's, you're like, oh, it's like, it's small stakes, and it's like literally it's just kind of mice trying to escape a snake, and the mice find the snake's nest with all its eggs in it.
Mm.
And Kinsey and Saxon jump in, and there's this brutal scene of them destroying the eggs.
Wow.
Like in the cute way that this is drawn,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but still they are chopping up, uh, you know, eggs with baby
Mm-hmm.
snakes in them. And then Liam is caught by the snake outside of the nest. And you find out that like, well, Liam's not the hothead, but Liam's got this heroic nature and just jumps onto the snake himself, this little tiny mouse. And so there's things like that where the character comes out more through what they do and what they say rather than a narrator appearing to tell you about them or some,
Got it.
symbology on there. Like it's not like Kinsey is, Kinsey's gray, but you don't get the feeling that that's like he's old necessarily
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But there's all these like great other like Peterson has just built out this world. There are all these maps. It's very much like that fantasy literature where you're looking at the maps and.
Can I interrupt real
Oh
quick?
yeah,
Because
please.
what came to mind too, like just as I'm envisioning this, do the mice wear clothes and like uniforms and stuff like Wind in the Willows, or is this more like Peter Rabbit, where they just kind of they you can understand them as the reader and they have like human interactions, but they're still like just they're more animal than they are
Well,
anthropomorphized.
no, it's a good question. They don't wear much, and
Okay.
that is very much symbolic.
Okay.
So the mouse guard wear these cloaks that literally just look like a handkerchief or something tied around their neck.
Mm-hmm.
I just flipped through the book to remind myself of the name. Sadie is the other mouse guard that we're introduced to. She actually has a nicer cloak that looks like it's fastened,
Mm-hmm.
with like a pin or something, and not just tied, like
Mm-hmm.
a kerchief. They carry swords if they're in the mouse guard, but if they're not in the mouse guard, they may wear an item or two, and it just kind of is a symbol of their status, like the grain, the mouse delivering the grain. He's just wearing like a little straw hat, like a farm
Okay.
bullet or something.
So it's not like Tolkien where they're wearing like ascots and suits and
Right.
all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Again, a la Wind in the Willows. I should just stuck with
Yeah. No, good point. The queen wears a little bit more when we eventually meet sort of the mice antagonists. Like they are antagonists and they are also mice. They have a very specific uniform that they are wearing, so that when you're seeing the drawings, you can
Mhm.
clearly, like, it's like a visual symbol. So it's like the stormtroopers kind of thing of like, you can see like all these people in this uniform are the bad guys. And that's, I don't know, that's just, it's again just like a subtle little touch that I think is cool. So yeah, rather than give you the play-by-play of every scene in this book, I will just tell you how it sort of mounts to its climax. And what I was so impressed by is the way it takes these beats from a medieval or fantasy story that you would recognize, and not only portrays them from like mouse eye level, which is very cool, and sets them in a different context because of that, but also how it helps the reader understand where this is a beat of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So like the snake is a big early monster that shows up, and I think just because of that mouse perspective, you see it as like, this is a monster. And while it's horrifying that two of the mice jump in its nest and slaughter its youngins, it kind of makes sense. It's like, I just think of finding like a nest of dragon's eggs or something like that's what your adventure would do. There's another scene where Sadie and an old member of the guard, I think it's Conrad, his mouse guard station is on the beach, and they are attacked by crabs. And it's like, man, in a mouse's eyes, a crab is so scary. It's like a kraken. And it's not just one of them. It's like 12 of them show up.
Wow.
So, these scenes of like, them jumping between the claws and her sword bouncing off of the shell. It's like, oh my God. That's
in that situation, is the crab sentient or intelligent too, or is it more like a mindless like monster?
It's very mindless. Like you don't, nothing that they say that's translated at all. They can't talk to them. And so it takes these beats, and I think that is what rather than being like a crutch that it falls on, it just helps you as a reader understand like where these where it's pivoting to, like where the motion of the story is going. And I think helps you identify with the stakes as they are for these mice, because what they are ultimately doing in this arc is quashing a rebellion.
Mhm.
And it was it's so funny because I read this a week or so ago, and then a few days ago rewatched this movie that you and I talked about, like in episode 3 or something. I don't know, when I was really into watching Magic Ninja movies, which is what I called them.
That's
And
right.
I talked about this movie called The White-Haired Witch, and then I found out, by the way, it is available uncut in its entirety on YouTube for free.
Whoa.
So I rewatched it a couple days ago, and it's like I'm seeing the same beats happen in that, which is a Chinese language film, and it's subtitled on YouTube, but it's very clunkily subtitled. Like the the sentence that's subtitled may appear, many seconds before the person actually says that line. So the reactions you're watching and the action you're watching, it's not always sync up to what you just read. But a similar invasion where they, there's almost this sense of like letting the conquering army in before you realize what their intentions are into your like very secure fort. And like, so all these things I'm recognizing as, oh, I just watched that in Mouse Garden. It's so neat to compare it to, to a movie like that, because the experience, I guess, was so different. Reading it was just very like cozy or something. I found myself so many times just sort of like staring at the texture of each drawing. Like some of the background textures are just so cool. The way, whether it's smudges of paint or whether it's like really detailed little lines on something, or, just outlines, like sort of shadows of trees and things like that. I mean, it's so well done. That's why I thought I got to get a print version of this.
I'm looking at it. Well, I'm looking at stills. I'm looking at pages from it now, and I can easily see why you'd want this in print. By the way, there are 2 versions on Amazon. One is you can buy the print for like $20-$30. Another, though, there's apparently a hardcover for $800. So I'm guessing there's a first edition that is highly collectible. So just keep that in mind. But as I'm looking through this, it's an interesting juxtaposition because it looks like an adult children's book.
Yes.
It has that sort of children's book aesthetic, but like, big ideas, a lot of text, a lot of, heavier elements. Does that translate for you?
Yeah, I think so. And it's not that the ideas are, bigger, scarier, or more important, but it's really that like refocusing of the stakes, because like the way you put it as an adult children's book, I definitely felt that, when I started reading it, I was like, oh, I should totally get this and read it with my niece and nephew, and they would enjoy it because it's like a fantasy tale, but it's these mice. And then, something like the snake egg slaughter happened, and I went, ooh, that might be really hard to discuss with them, And there's some points where it's like, you feel like they're in some real danger here. There's a fire that happens inside sort of a little mice cavern. And it's like, oh my God, like this is, they're mice. So you don't get that feeling of like, it's not like Dwayne the Rock Johnson. When the room that he's in catches on fire, you're, 99% sure that he's just going to bust through the wall. Like it's not a problem.
Yeah.
I've also been rewatching the Fast and Furious, if you can't tell. But
I thought you were going to reference that shitty tower movie he was in, where
I
it was
did watch that.
I watched that on a plane against my will.
Oh, so terrible. Yeah. Well, but yeah, I think that's what gives it the adult version of a kid's book. I do think you could read it with kids, but there are those grown-up issues of like life and death sort of circumstances and stuff. And I think kids would feel that the terror even more of like the crab attack or something, because they're going to see this 2 tiny mice, their swords, clinking off the crab armor. And it's like, oh my gosh, that is a real threat. This is a beholder that has just come out of the ocean.
Wow.
Mess with them or whatever.
One thing that I'm looking at as we chat is you're talking about Mouse Guard Fall 1152. There's also a winter and a spring.
Yes.
Or no, I'm sorry, Mouse Guard 3, the Black Axe. I thought it looked like spring. Does fall the very first part of the story, or does that pick up somewhere?
I agonized over this
Mm-hmm.
and went through Wikipedia and everything because it is super confusingly, and great question, by the way, because I wouldn't have thought to mention this, but it's kind of confusing the way the books are labeled in Comixology. So as far as I can tell, Fall 1152 is the first volume ever.
Okay.
And it is 6 books. So when it shows the covers within that, you'll
Yeah.
see it says number 1 of 6.
Okay.
So I think that arc was planned that way. And then on Comixology, there is a volume 2, Winter 1152, and volume 3, The Black Axe.
Yeah.
So I did download all of those. I just haven't gotten around to reading them all.
There's also on Amazon Mouse Guard role playing box set, first edition, second edition. How does that fit? And is that just a side thing? Does that somehow straddle or
I don't know
itself into the story?
I mean, I assume it's more a case of the you're playing out the story in that role playing game.
Okay.
But I'm very curious about that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the second edition of that came out sort of recently.
Wow. And there's a third edition. There's also a Mouse Guard alphabet book, Mouse Guard Swords and Strongholds. This is almost Game of Thrones-esque in the sprawling canon that just kind of gets, I'm sure most of it's David Peterson has his hand in, if not all of it, but still I had never heard of this until this evening when we started recording.
Yeah, because I switched up the book I was going to talk about to do.
But even still, this seems like one of those books that would appear on, Rolling Stone's 100 important graphic novels as literature, or whenever they talk about comics as literature. This kind of feels like it should be on that list, top of the list, or near the top.
Yeah, because it is and the reason it lends itself to a role playing game is because this is the world building in this is complete. Like it is. It is a built world that's not like, it doesn't have humans in it. It's not borrowing off of, this isn't happening behind the walls of King Arthur's castle or something. This is like its own mythology.
Yeah.
And I think it succeeds because of that. But I think that what you're calling out too makes me think that while it found a really big audience, I think the reason it passed you and me by is that the timing didn't sync up to sort of the renaissance of comics that we're in right now. Like he was just a little too early. So
imagine that.
I know, isn't that crazy? And it's weird. I must have been I was back into reading comic books in 2007. That's when we were at that job together.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't a thing. I still had to go to that one store whose name we shall not speak in Nashville to get comics, and honestly probably hated that experience so much that I ended up getting them at like Barnes and Noble or something. And so it was just it was like, I don't know. And it's also one of those books where I think the line is kind of blurred between, I don't want to say serious literature, but those books that they're graphic novels, but somehow they're not in the comic book section. They're in another section or something, or they're not distributed by Diamond or something like that. So they're not in comic book shops. It almost feels like that. But I know that's not the case. I know it's in comic book shops. I know it's on a comic book, publisher has put it out. It's, it just kind of slipped through the cracks. And, but I'm happy to be discovering it now. And it's also one of those things where there's so much to discover that when you read the first volume and you like it, you feel like, oh, it can't go wrong.
This does. as I'm looking through it, I'm already excited to get this, and I'll probably just jump straight into the hardcover because this looks like something that I should
get that $800 one. Sure, I'm sure it's worth it. Totally worth it.
It better come with Peter Davidson. Is it Peter Davidson? Is that his name?
David Peterson.
Peter Davidson was an old Doctor Who actor. No, David Peterson. The $800 one actually comes. He comes to your house and explains his thought process behind every chapter, and then you just go from. That would be amazing. Really, what is? I'll have to look into why that one's $800. So this is not to cut you off, but this is something clearly that you and I, or readers like you and I, would like. It seems like it's. Is there a minimum age you think for this, or could a 13-year-old or a 10-year-old pick this up and get something from it?
In a world of Harry Potter, it can't feel scarier than Harry Potter. There's no witchcraft or anything in a way that makes it scarier, because these are blades that the mice are using.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, 10 and up, you've probably run into some other fiction where tragic things have happened, and younger readers may feel that sort of terror. But then I'm sure there's probably a big age range in the middle there.
Yeah.
That's going to be super bored by this.
What about like
10 to 15 and then 30 plus? I don't know.
What about tragic deaths though? Like, are there any characters who just die either tragically or die when you've come to love them? Is that, I ask because younger kids sometimes have problems with those themes. Is that something to look out for?
It's something to look out for. I can't, point to anything without being spoilerish.
Yeah.
But there are deaths in it. A lot of that happens off screen. So,
okay.
It's just sort of clear, that person, that mouse didn't make it.
Yeah.
But it also, does that great thing at the end of, Kinsey and Saxon, argued more fiercely than ever, but they were the best of friends. Kind of gives you that and the rest of the story kind of thing. And they lived happily ever after sort of version.
Yeah. Did you mention the publisher, by the way? Did you say Archaea?
Yes.
You did.
Archaea, yes.
I had completely missed that. And I'll point that out again because they are a fantastic studio. I've got several books from them too. So that's almost like a stamp of quality in the same way that Drawn and Quarterly is.
I was about to say, it's got a very Drawn and Quarterly feel to it. So
yeah. In fact, Archaea is the one, if I'm not mistaken, they put out Tale of Sand, Jim Henson's Tale of Sand, which
totally makes sense.
Yeah, I have talked about that book a lot and hold it in very high regard. So that's, if anything, that's like, if you were hesitating buying this, just knowing that Archaea did it. So as I'm Googling as you talk, Archaea also put out an amazing hardcover boxed set in 2009 that looks just amazing. It's got
Mouse Guard? Oh boy.
Mouse Guard hardcover. It's got a snowflake on the cover. So I'm going to check that out too. Who knows how much that is. Oh, well, there it is. First edition, second edition. So yeah, I mean, this looks like definitely a book that I want, but also just it looks hugely collectible. It just looks, everything about it. Just this is totally a Taylor pick.
Oh, I know. It is.
I'm shocked you got to it before I did, to be honest with you.
That is funny. It does. Now that you say that, I didn't pick it because of that, but it does feel like so much like, this is something you would have brought to me.
You must read this.
Comixology Unlimited. I mean, give them points for this.
Wow. So, I'm looking right now. The $800 one is in fact that giant hardcover limited edition box set thing. Yeah. So anyway, anything else? Sorry, I keep cutting you off. Anything else you want to say? I mean, you don't want to get too spoilery, so it's always a delicate balance.
It's 6 issues. It's actually not a long read. I just I think it was more of a pacing thing why I kept putting it down. But yeah, once I just sort of dug into it, it's just I really enjoyed it, and I love looking at the panels. I will bring up that digital versus print thing. Although I think the guided view works pretty well on this, it lets me with my old eyes focus on one little panel at a time. I just think the print has got to be superior just because of the way it looks so detailed and analog. Even if digital tools were used, it's it just has that hand drawn feel. I mean, all comics are hand drawn at some point, but it's like, it just, you're seeing like brush strokes and stuff. And when it comes to that, it's like, I really want to see that in print. So.
Can I get really geeky? What's the paper quality like?
Oh, no. Sorry. I don't have it in print. So I don't know. I have it. I just,
you have ordered it, but it hasn't arrived yet.
I have not even ordered it. I'm just saying I will.
I mistook you. I thought you said you loved it so much you had ordered it.
No.
Okay.
Sorry. I love it so much. I will.
My bad. Well, hey man, I not much more to say. I think this is a clear winner, 5-star pick. Definitely. This is sort of like the epitome episode of what we do. Like, this is finding books that are off the beaten path that might be somebody's new favorite thing. And I love that process of discovery every single time. It always it never fails to delight me. So,
and it feels like like the best Image books that we found or the best any books that we've found, there's a whole world here to enjoy. So if you do like this one book, you're going to feel like, oh man, there's so much more to explore, you know? And I love that feeling too. So I'll leave it there.
Well, folks can find us wherever podcasts are found: Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, Apple Podcasts, blah, blah, blah. Search for Panelism, subscribe, and tell your friends. Give us feedback. Typically, the best place to leave feedback is on our Instagram account. That is panelism.inc on Instagram. That's .ink, all one username, panelism.inc. Panelism.inc is also our website. So you can find past episodes. And a lot of folks have been going back through the back catalog, which has been really fun to see as we look at our listeners' stats every week. Some old favorites keep popping up. So go back, enjoy past episodes. Let us know what you think. Shoot us an email or go to Instagram. If you have a book you think we should be looking at, or if you're a creator and you want to have us look at your work or talk to you on the show, we'd love to hear from you. So reach out and let us know.
I second everything Taylor said. and that's my sign off.
Excellent. Well, we never have a really good way to say goodbye, so I'll just say goodbye to you, and we'll catch you all next week.
I will see you then, or I will see you at another time.